Kathy, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. I'm really, really excited to get our listeners to be able to listen.
I'm excited too. Thank you.
Yeah. So you have one of the coolest journeys to your current role as a trainer and consultant in sports. And so for those that don't know, how did you get where you are right now?
Well, my background was really unique. I was a nurse, and so that was the perfect transition, right? Nursing to sports. It just made sense. So I was a nurse, always wanted to teach. I did some teaching of nursing, and then got married and started doing some groups with the Cleveland Indians. And they were starting a volunteer sales club. And the vice president at the time called me and said, "Hey, Kathy, you want to come? Come to the meeting and let's talk about it." And I said, "Nah, I don't want to go." And he said, "Well, there's going to be tasty beverages and food." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll come." So went to the meeting, and they were explaining the perks and everything you could do. And he came up next to me and said, "So what do you think?" And I said, "I don't think so." And he said, "You're right, I didn't think you could do it." And he knew which buttons to push, because you never tell Kathy Burrows she cannot do something, because she will figure out how.
Yes.
So I said, "Fine, you've got me." So my very first sale, the old Mistake on the Lake, I sold out the entire bleachers, 5,000 seats. And I thought, how hard is this? And then I waited for the second sale, and I thought, okay, this is hard. I better have a plan. And that came back to Nursing 101 and my nursing analysis and my nursing care plans, and I transferred it over to sports and ended up outselling existing reps that were paid. So they asked me for about 4 years to come aboard full time, and I kept telling them no thanks. Finally, I gave in, and I started working with the Cleveland Indians, and it was a wonderful experience from them on. I headed their volunteer sales club. I headed their inside sales. I did trainings. I was allowed to sell everything from $1 million suite leases to corporate to groups to season, and I was responsible for 2/3 of all the revenue. So there was no way I wanted to fail.
That's pretty incredible. And I think, a lot of times we spend a lot of time as sales trainers talking about what's different about sales in 2018 versus even just a couple of years ago. But, what are some of the similarities that you've seen from when you started with the Indians to where sales is right now?
Some things never change. Some things do change. We're not 1980 anymore, so we have to have a different mindset. We're preparing for 2020 and beyond. And sports as a whole, entertainment industry as a whole, it was kind of behind the eight ball on that. But similarly, there's some things never change. People buy from people. People buy emotionally. People like to be valued, and that relationship building is key. And that is still a crucial part of sales. So you can buy online, but at the end of the day, you still want a body to talk to. You still want somebody to share the experience with. You still want somebody to talk about it with. So relationship building is still key, no matter whether it was 1980 or whether it's 2018 right now. That's still a very important part of the sale.
So I know I sent you a list of questions, but I want to jump around here because I think it bleeds into it very well. When I was making that transition from executive consulting sales to sports, I had the incredible privilege of working with you to help start the WNBA team in Atlanta, and coming from a background where, we didn't have almost any time to get to know our clients really on that corporate side. I was just so impressed by your client first, very positive sales style. So, how would you describe your mentality to selling? And why has it worked so well for you wherever you've been, and now the legions of fans that flock to your trainings and your LinkedIn articles and your Twitter articles?
I believe in selling for the long term, not the short term, and I think that's key. When I work with someone, even in Atlanta, we didn't know the people. You're up transplanted into a city you don't know. You have to figure out, how am I going to meet these people? So I was all about meeting them. I love people's stories. I love what makes people excited. I love finding out about them. So building that relationship and finding those needs and finding what makes them tick gives me the opportunity to recommend something that I think would work for them. I remind them a lot. I remind them a lot that it's not a win for me unless it's a win for them. And I think that's my motto, because you can't just sell something. And the word pitch drives me up a wall when I hear, what should I pitch them? You can't pitch them anything until you know what it is that makes them tick, what it is they might want. So when it's a win for them, then I'm happy and it's a win for me. I tend to assume a sale. If I prospect and I find that somebody, I look at it and I think, wow, they should be doing business with us, then I go in assuming the sale. And it's kind of, my attitude is kind of, you have to prove to me why it's not a good fit, because I see all the reasons why it is. And it becomes a conversation then, which I really love.
So I think you make such a good point. You know that I'm in at least 1,000,000% agreement with you about, a win for the client. But what does that actually look like? Because I know that gets talked a lot about in sports, but it's hard for a young rep to define what a win for the client is when they're constantly being told you have to make 100 phone calls and you have to close business every day, all the time. And that can be really overwhelming for a rep to remember to think a win for the client. So what does a win for the client look like? I know it's vague, but as specific as you can.
Well, as I said, selling for the long term is important. I'm going to back it up just a little bit, because a lot of teams have retention staff.
Yep.
And you want to make sure you sell smartly and the customer is very happy with their purchase and they're satisfied with their purchase, so they will renew their purchase. If you sell for the moment because you've got to hit a quota and you're just pushing stuff at them, they're not going to renew, and now you've screwed your teammate and your teammate's not able to renew, nobody's hitting quotas, and that's a bad thing. I don't want to keep selling that same seed every year. I want to sell it once and have a real happy customer. So what is a win to them? I want to be able for them to look back. If it's a corporate customer, I want them to see the value of doing business with us. I want them to see that, yes, it is affecting my business. Yes, it is helping my business. And if that means that I have to go in and help them, show them how to smartly use our product, how to get the best benefit of our product, and how to track that usage and success, then I'll do it. Because that's what's important. It's not just I'm going to sell it to them and walk away. They have to see the value, and seeing that value, and visiting them and going down in their seats and seeing their people that they're sending happy, having a good time, seeing the results that if it's used for prospects, they're actually closing business, then that's a win. That's a very smart win. The consumer side, if they're enjoying it with their family, if they're creating memories, that's a win. So what is it exactly that they have as a need? Do they need more family time? Do they want to be able to just get together with their kids and have a good time? Do they just want, if it's a husband and wife, do they want to be able to just come out and have dinner at the park and just enjoy baseball? If it's a true fanatical fan, are we giving them everything they want as an experience so that they can really enjoy that baseball game? It's more than just, how do you like your seat?
Yeah, and I know this may seem a little out there for some, but it's almost really important that, almost line for line, that those people whoever they buy, whether it's B2B or B2C, they can reiterate that value and they can reiterate how they're going to utilize back to you. Because a lot of times the sale's made and, all of a sudden, they are just now have a season ticket, or they've been sold 300 group tickets and they have no idea what to do with it. The best clients I've ever had, there was a plan in place, the minute that phone was put down, the minute the tickets were transferred to their account, and they knew exactly what they were going to do with them and how they were going to use them.
Exactly. When you're supersizing, especially, those plans start in the off season and they build up into the actual event. But how many of the reps, think about it, how many of you will, a month prior, send out an email and say, here's where I recommend everyone park when they come. This will be closer for their entrance. Here's the closest concession stands near you. Here's the closest restrooms. Just those little things make a huge difference in the consumer. They just view it as, you really care about me, and that's a win, because you should be really caring about them. The fact that if you build that relationship and you have that much trust between you, the fact is there can be an upsell later. You know, you might suggest a different seating area that's closer to the action. You might suggest an all-inclusive area. You might suggest, you know, your company's doing really well and you're really enjoying this. How about we add on a couple suites during the season to your experience? So you're able to build that trust and recommend, and now they will listen because they see the value in what you brought them.
Yeah, and it's not just, you know, upselling or cross-selling, but a lot of times they'll become your best evangelists too, right? And all of a sudden, you'll start seeing leads come in from all over the place. You know, I think, you know, I say this all the time, the best salespeople that I've ever seen who get referrals the best aren't the ones that are usually going out there and asking people for referrals. A lot of times they're the ones that their process has been so good, their customer service has been so good that other people can't help but recommend that salesperson to their friends, families, coworkers, their network, etc.
Right. I remember we used to have a dugout suite that was actually closer to the batter than the pitcher was. Mm-hmm. And when the owner would release it, you know, the notice would be sent out. They're releasing it for the upcoming games, you know, try and sell it. I had volumes of people that I had interacted with that waited for, all I had to do was click of a button because they knew I was giving them the best experience, and they added on other people that they felt would be interested in the same way. So consequently, all I had to do was send a quick email, and within 5 minutes, I would have them sold. So, you know, you build that rapport, you build that trust, and oftentimes also they're your living testimonials. Far better than I had a great experience buying. Well, better than that, I actually have a great experience using my purchase. And here's why. That says volumes, and that helps you sell many more.
That's really awesome. You know, one of the questions I ask, you know, each time I do this, because I think it's so important, is, you know, you've had a lot of interaction with a lot of incredible people in sports during your time. You know, who have been some of those people that stood out, some of the key influences on you, some of the people that you've seen that really stood out? You know, what was it about their styles that impacted you, stuff that you stole, or stuff that you saw that's just like, yeah, that's the way to do it?
My mom, who was a huge cheerleader for me in sports and a huge cheerleader for me converting from nursing to sports, just told me to keep finding the good in people. And I think that really helped me a lot. Because even a dissatisfied customer can be turned around. So I was always the one that was given all the dissatisfied people so that I could fix it. Yep. But Scott O'Neill, to me, is the epitome of a great sports leader. I can't say enough for Scott. When I consulted at the Garden for about 1.5 years, it was part of the team. He was part of the team. Yes, he had an office on the same floor, but more often than not, you could see him on the floor among the sales reps, encouraging them, talking to them about sales, going with them on meetings. He believes in his people. And when you can, he's now with the 76ers, and when you can have a waiting list and they hadn't even gone yet to playoffs, that speaks volumes for his philosophy of following a process. And I learned a lot from him about recognition, appreciating your reps, and really getting them to the level, the next level of where they can be. Another person is Jeff Overton. He was a vice president at the Indians at the time. He was then with the Rangers and the Padres, and he's now with the White Sox in heading their spring training facility. He was a person I used to come up with the most amazing ideas, I thought. And I would go out and tell him my amazing ideas. And he always let me run with them. He would first ask me 3-5-7, and I call it the Overton 3-5-7 rule. 3 years, 5 years, 7 years down the road, what impact will this idea have? And that taught me visionary planning and not knee-jerk reactions. So it really gave me a whole different mindset as to how I was selling. But he also believed in me, and he'd say, go for it. And if the idea didn't work, he would kind of come in and brush you off and say, okay, what'd you learn from it? But he believed in you enough to say, go out and try it again. And that, to me, was a great leader that doesn't just don't try anything, just go with the tried and true. He lets you use your brain and actually create things. Another person that I really, really enjoyed working with and learned a lot from was Amy Shearer. She was a vice president at Madison Square Garden, and now she's the chief revenue officer over at New York Red Bull. Her philosophy of never stop learning is so contagious. She will tell you right up front, I don't know it all. And I'm researching, I'm trying to find out. And even with her title, titles can be a dime a dozen, but even with her title, she is still researching. She contacted me the other day about a question. That is really important for all our reps to learn, is that you never stop learning, no matter what level you're at. And that's the kind of leaders you want to emulate. Those are the people you want to follow, because they know that no one has all the answers. And so let's keep trying to find the best way to do things.
Yeah, and so I have follow-ups on all, especially those first three, or the last three. You talk about Amy with never stop learning, and that's something that we talk about so often. And you know this, but when I would go to a sales training, I'd always try to find the person that I believe that just didn't want to be there. And my goal in that training was to convert that person over to the side of good, because I always felt like if I got them over, then the whole room was with us too. But a lot of time there is that mentality when I'm in year 3, 4, and 5 that the learning stops. What are important things that you learn in your 3rd, 4th, 5th year of sales that help differentiate, those top salespeople from those next level?
I think it's the time when you realize that, we've been doing it. We're Einstein's definition of insanity.
Yeah.
We're doing the same things. We're expecting different results. And wait, I have a brain. I want to use it. And so breaking out of your shell, breaking out of your comfort zone, and starting to put together your strategic plan and coming up with ideas that are different from the norm, and actually trying them and figuring out how to make them work takes you to a whole nother level. And I think that's really important, because we can keep doing same old and be successful. But if you have the opportunity to be even more successful, earn a better commission, and even more commission, but bring more people aboard to experience our product in new ways, then you see the light bulb go off, and it gets people excited. They get re-energized in their job. And I think especially in that 3-year role, we need re-energization, if that's a word. But we need to be re-energized. We need to stop just coming to work and doing it the same old way. We need to figure out different ways to do things so that we can look at it with a fresh approach and get excited again.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, is that, I think a lot of times, we as managers and directors can treat all salespeople the same. Everyone's on the FSE team's got to make 60 calls a day, but a lot of times it's taking a couple minutes to sit down with the reps, and the reps themselves need to do this too. Take a look at where when they're closing sales, where are these sales coming from? Do a little autopsy on them and say, all right, how do I make sure that I can keep evolving and changing what I do to make sure that I'm as efficient and successful as possible? There's a lot of make these calls, and there's not a lot of guidance around it or a lot of thought by the reps around it. When I think a lot of times the best reps seem to be the ones that spend the most amount of time in the right places for them.
Right. And I think too, a lot of it is leadership. I've been doing tons of leadership training lately, and changing leaders' mindset, because leaders have always had the mindset of, this is how I learned from my leaders, so this is the way we're going to do it, has to change. We're in 2018. That thought philosophy has to change. And so, yes, you have to pound out 1 million calls a day, but at some point you have to look and say, wait, they're successful, they're hitting goals, and they're doing it in different ways. So I need to step back and reevaluate. Am I managing numbers, or am I managing people? And as long as the revenue is there, it's their own small business. So how are they going to run their business? And, part of your day should be spent in social selling. Totally agree. Part of your day should be spent in prospecting. Yes, you should have power hours. I mean, you can't expect a call to come in unless you have a call to go out. But we also need to have in-person visits. We also need to be in front of people, front and center. It's very hard to say no to somebody when you're looking right at them.
Yep.
And those are some of the things we don't utilize. We get so focused on call volume that we forget there's other ways to sell.
Well, not just that, but everyone sells differently.
Exactly. Like a teacher that has a class of kids. I mean, you teach for the commonality, but everyone's different. So you have to give that specialized attention to get the best out of them.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And so I think that actually moves directly into, the question I had from Jeff is, in sports, you hear a lot of directors say, well, I never tell my salespeople they can't do something. Yet, a lot of times, when I do trainings or, even in some of the environments I've been in, you hear a lot, well, I don't think I can do that. Well, I can't do that. Like, though they won't let me do that. When the environments I think that you and I see was the most success, where it's literally like, right, like fall on your face, like please go for it. Let's give it a shot. Let's try some things. Let's be as creative as we possibly can. What are the differences between a culture of go for it, and what are some of the subtle differences between a culture of go for it and a culture where they may say that, but the reality is the reps are still terrified to make mistakes?
The culture itself is like night and day. You look at El Paso, Chihuahua, has a tremendous culture. From Brad Taylor, the GM, to Nick Seckerson, the director. You look at them and it's like, come to us with your ideas and let's review them. And okay, put together your strategy of how you're going to do it and let's give it a shot. And we'll coach you in it. We'll help you with it. If it doesn't work, okay, let's figure out why. The idea wasn't bad, so probably it was the execution. Let's figure out how we can make it better. That kind of culture has people who are creative, who are trying things, who want to get better, who are not afraid to reach out and say, hey, I've got an idea. Then you look at some other teams and you look at that culture and it's pound out the calls and end it there. It's a more depressed culture. Oppressed culture, I should say, not necessarily depressed, a little bit more oppressive. You go in, you do your job, and you come out. It depends on who the person is. Some people like the structure of, this is what I have to do. I have to make these calls. I have to do this. I have to do that. Other people like to say, you know what, I have a brain and I want to use it, which gets me into millennials. I hear a lot, as you probably have too, that the millennials kind of drive us nuts. They don't want to follow the rules. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. I look at them. I love them. I absolutely love working with them.
Agreed.
They're my favorite people to work with. Why? Because they do have a brain, and they do want to run their small business, and they do want to go for it. They just need that coaching and guidance and support. And so that is where I see the change happen, that breakdown between leadership and the staff. And we'll get there. It's just getting mindset changed for where we are today.
And I always thought I was resourceful, but working with millennials, when you unlock what they do, they're among the most resourceful salespeople I've ever. I wouldn't say creativity all the time, because I always thought, especially you, but I always thought I was a pretty creative salesperson. But their resourcefulness just, throws me under a table.
Oh yeah, yep. When I'm training, sometimes I look at them and I go, oh, wow, that is such a cool idea. I wish I would have thought of that. I'm so jealous. But, but then they take it and run with it. And it's like, wow. In LA, I was working with the Sparks, and a couple of their salespeople came up with a thought that they wanted to run with for a supersized group. And I'm like, not sure how it's going to work, but put your strategy together. And they're running with it. And they just checked in the other day, and I'm so thrilled for them because they took it, they saw it, and they want it to work, and they're making it work. And I'm extremely excited with that.
That's awesome. So, I think this is important. What would you say to a rep who's struggling in a challenging culture? They may have taken a big swing, they landed on their face, and instead of all right, let's get back up, let's figure out why that didn't work, they're like, you can never do that again, that stunk. What do you say to a rep in that situation to encourage them to continue to take swings, to continue to try to break out and do those things?
You have to take a step back and look at what didn't work and why it didn't work. And usually when I do the strengths test, when I work with teams, I usually find more of the millennials are good on strategy, but a little less on execution.
Yes.
And so that's usually where the lag happens. So how can we execute better?
Yep.
What is our plan to execute better? And when you start thinking that way, then their whole strategy as they write it makes more sense, because then they write from strategy to execution, and now they have the whole thought process planned out. And they can go back to it and say, okay, I have a much better grasp on this now, and I know how I'm going to make it work. And it makes them feel more confident going in. sometimes you have to take those hits and misses just to step back and say, how do I get better?
Yeah.
How do I make this work?
Yeah. It's a Michael
Just
Jordan
like
thing, right? Sorry.
yeah, well, just that first sale of 5,000, it's like, sure, this is so easy. And then you wait and you think, okay, this was not so easy. That was luck.
Yeah.
Now I got to figure out what I'm doing.
When we were at the National Sales Center, we used to try to make sure that they called Chivas USA the first week so they didn't get a big head. So they got a lot of people that were speaking Spanish or saying no, to make sure that they got their head on right.
Yep.
And then going back to Scott, because I was always obviously I worked for Scott too, and I think the world of him, and he's why I was able to start in the industry. But the thing that the 76ers did that I thought was incredible, and a lot of people say, well, they've got 100 salespeople, that's why. But I don't necessarily think that was the case as much as the organizational philosophy of selling a vision and selling the experience, right? So can you talk to, because I want to make sure that we keep talking about this through what I'm doing, and I know it's something you talk about through what you're doing. Sales isn't made on sales aren't made on how the team's doing. Sales are made for what the fans get out of it and buying into something that's going to be happening. So can you talk to about the importance of those two things in your line of in your work and where you've been?
Yeah, I worked with teams that are real successful. I've worked with teams that are horrendous on the field or on the court. So you have both ends of the spectrum. What happens more often than not, if you start a new team, people flock. They all want to come to it, and that's really nice. But then 3 years down the road, reality sets in, and you start losing people, and you really have to start selling. So that difference from order taking to selling can become very scary. But same thing with teams that aren't doing well. We can use it as an excuse. The product on the court, the product on the field is really bad, so it's really hard to sell. Well, yeah, it is, but are you selling that product or are you selling the experience? And I know we talk a lot, everybody talks about selling the experience, but what does that really mean?
Yeah.
And that is what you have to figure out with each person, with each company. What is the experience they are looking for? We can't just go in and say, we have this night, you're going to love it, here's what it's going to look like, and here's the date. We just put them in a box, and that's not the way life works.
I think
you know yourself, and you and I both know, as a rep, if we are asked, what do you think about, how should we approach this, and you give ideas, and they use some of your ideas, you're going to go through a brick wall to make it happen. Yeah. If they come to you and say, you're selling this, and this is how it's set up, you're going to do it because you have to, but the passion's not there. So it's the same thing when you're selling to people. The team can really be pathetic, but when you look at them and you have them help design what they want and you create it for them, all of a sudden now they're part of the process. They're going to make it work. They get excited.
The brand, way too often, and this goes from teams all the way down to the individual reps, for those that struggle a lot, ends up being more of a crutch than a real opportunity. They kind of rest on what the brand is and the culture of winning or whatever that is without using it as kind of a hammer to help the process. They lean on it until it breaks, and then there's real challenges and real struggles to get those people back afterwards or sell new people when we should be swinging the hammer of the power of not what the brand is, but what the brand can do for people, regardless of what's happening on the field.
Exactly. Players come, players go. You can't sell players. You really can't sell players because you never know if they're going to be there tomorrow. But you can sell what they're going to get when they come. That's why I've always said I've never sold a ticket ever, ever, ever in my entire life. I've never sold a ticket. That is a silly piece of paper or something on your phone that gets you through the gate. But what I sell you, what I give you is an experience unlike anything you're going to have once you get past those doors. And that's what I can control.
Yep. And for those that think that Kathy's just saying that, I think that may have been the first thing you said to me when I was trying to figure out how to make that transition from doing the B2B corporate sales I've been doing at CEB to selling those WNBA tickets, which was the first thing I did. That was like almost literally the first thing you ever said to me, and I remember that very clearly. So. Oh, wow. So you've worked with an incredible array of sports teams over the years, and I think one of the things that we need to always take a look at is not what are some of the differences between selling each, but what are some of the commonalities, that we see, and not for the sales teams that do the best, but I'm always way more interested in when you look at the top salespeople on the top sales teams. Kathy, what are some of the commonalities that you see, the skills, the traits, the attributes across all those top salespeople?
I think first and foremost, they're tremendous listeners. Listening really helps you a lot. They don't go in and offer an entire bag of potato chips. They give you one chip at a time to whet the appetite and then listen to what the person is saying. So they don't pitch. They never pitch. They find needs. They have conversations. They don't try and close on the first call. They have a very strong relationship that they build, and they build trust by doing that. They get out of their comfort zone, so they're not afraid to try something different. And they really care about giving their client the best experience they can. They truly care. It's not just lip service. And they have strong follow-up. I think the number one reason, well, I'm sure the number one reason we fail in sports is our lack of follow-up. But top sales reps will have a very strong follow-up. You may have sold to that person, but they are part of your Rolodex, so to speak. You will stay in touch with them. You will care about them. Even if they're transferred over to a retention team, you still keep in touch once in a while. And that strong follow-up is where you start getting your referrals and people coming back and saying, hey, so-and-so told me that I should call you. I had a kid once that was given, he came in and they sold according to cities. So he was in Cleveland and they gave him a city to go after of Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh is in Pennsylvania. Imagine that. So, he was really discouraged at first, and what am I going to do? I'm being set up to fail. And I'm like, well, you have three choices. You can say, screw it, I quit. Or you can say, yeah, I'll try it. Or you can say, I'm going to show you that I can make this work. Tell me what you want to do, and let's go after it. So he decided, I want to make it work. So he was out of the office a couple of days a week in the off season. He would spend it in Pittsburgh, just pounding the shoe leather and meeting with people. And they have their own team, right? They have the Pirates. Yep. He was able to lead them in sales, and in season sales and suite sales, and having a territory that was far away. But he did it because he was able to build relationships, have a strong relationship, found a need for them, and became more of a trusted friend, and was able to offer them something that he could follow up with and make sure happen a great experience.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we hit on that, because I think strong follow-up isn't something that we often hear associated with sales as much as we should. And strong follow-up doesn't just mean following up with the people when they're at the game, but a lot of times in that rush to make 100 calls a day, we may have a good conversation with someone in February. They say, give us a call in June, and then we never remember to kind of keep that person in our pipeline, to keep them warm, maybe with an email every once in a while. Can you talk to and touch on the importance of pipeline management and follow up within that pipeline? Because pipeline management is something that we hear all the time, but I don't think people really understand why it's so important outside of, well, my manager just wants to see how many sales I have coming in. Why is that pipeline management and the follow-up associated so important to a sales rep?
Well, first of all, everybody's going to be a customer of someone. If not you, they're going to go somewhere else. So shame on you if it wasn't you due to lack of follow-up.
Absolutely.
And that, that to me always bothered me. We have tremendous CRM systems now, and I know so many staff that I work with fight CRM systems. It just takes so much time. It's there for a purpose. It's there to help you. It's there to take those notes to remind you to do things. You can set it up in CRM to remind yourself to call. These are the things that are extremely important, is that follow-up, and not just on that date, but like you said, in the interim, in between. What can you do to keep in touch with them so that you don't lose that interest that was there? Pipelines are one of the most important things we have. I think the name pipeline itself is turns a lot of people off, but there's funnels, there's pipelines, I don't know, whatever you call it. At the end of the day, you have to have 3.5 times as many in your pipeline than the revenue that you're expected to bring in.
Yep.
Because all of those in your pipeline are not going to close. So you need to be continually prospecting so that you have that ability to hit that sales goal. And that prospecting should be done daily. It should not be already prospected, I don't know where else to call. There should continually be new prospects coming in, because when you think of it, every time you close one or someone says, no, I don't want to hear from you anymore, that's one less on your list. So you got to have that 3.5 times in order, the number, in order to hit that goal. You don't hit goals by luck. You hit goals by strategy and planning.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of backing up your goal. If your season ends in September, then strive to hit your goal in July.
Absolutely.
And you need to back that up. But when you do that, you need to back up your whole plan as to how you're going to sell so that you can do that. And that goes back to your pipeline. What have you got going in it? Large groups, small groups, season sales, suite sales. What have you got? How often are you touching base with them? How are you getting them from cool to warm? Once you have them warm, what is your strategy to get them to hot to purchase? What are your steps you're going to do? It's one thing to go into a one-on-one with your leader and say, here's my pipeline, these are warm, these are hotter, these are cool. More important to me, I don't care what you got in there, it's what are you doing and what are your next steps?
Yep.
So that pipeline is the process that you set up to move your strategy along, and it's got to continually keep moving. It's like a river, you don't want it to dry up. It's got to keep flowing, and it's got to keep running. Otherwise, it's just going to be barren. So you need to continue that flowing, and you do that continually around the clock, yearly. You never stop prospecting.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I want to make sure that I illuminate this point that you make, because I think it's so important, is we spend a lot of time, even if you're diligent on your pipeline, I need new business in, new business in, new business in, new business in. We've got to remember that our pipeline tells a story every day too, right? So, if all of a sudden you're seeing your pipeline swollen to 7, 8, 9 times what your goal is, you need to take a step back and be like, all right, what do I need to do to move the needle on some of these today? Because I can't keep sitting on a pipeline this big and having no movement with it. It's got to be, it's got to be partly what influences what you do every single day, right?
Right. You should have enough in your pipeline that one of your power hours, I'm a big fan of 2 power hours a day, but one of your power hours should be spent on moving the pipeline along.
No doubt.
And then we tend to not do that. We tend to just start calling from a list right away, and it's like, whoa, back up. What have you already got going on that you need to continue that flow? Yep. So we need to focus on the pipeline on one of those. We can do new pipeline additives for another one, and that's where you get your new calls coming in that are going out. But right now, what are you doing to keep that flow moving so that you move these people along? As I said, people are going to be customers of someone's, and if you're not moving them along, they're going to jump off and they're going to go somewhere else.
No doubt. And you touched on, and one of the ones you made is people have to get outside of their comfort zone, and you know very well that I couldn't agree with that one anymore. I think a lot of times when people say out of their comfort zone, they tend to confuse it with just group sales. If you were going to talk a little bit, what's outside someone's comfort zone, I think people who are selling get the idea in group sales, especially if they've seen any of your work. But what can outside of their comfort zone be for a rep who's needs to make ticket buyer leads or is told they need to sell corporate? What are some other ways to get out of their comfort zone to find sales?
A lot of people I find are not comfortable in the one-on-one situation. And that is a start to the comfort zone right there. Yep. They're not real good on one-on-one. They don't want to meet with people. And yourself, B2B, a lot of it is meeting.
No doubt.
So first of all, I think in an inside sales program, we do a huge injustice by only focusing on the 60 calls a day, 100 calls a day, close, and not graduating them. When they mastered that, our job is to graduate them to the next experience, and that should be we should be really developing a person. So the next experience should be getting them out of that comfort zone, helping them learn how to do the one-on-one, helping them get in front of people, and then what to do once they get in front of them. I've found that, especially in the B2B world, setting up that meeting, sometimes I strongly encourage when they're writing their strategies, what can you do that's different that the team hasn't done before? Can you do a corporate after hours? Yep. Can you, off season? Can you do a corporate breakfast meeting? And, get out of your comfort zone, invite them, and make sure that you're going to the top person that you want to be there. Talk to your president, talk to your vice president. Can they do a 15-minute little talk on the importance of our business and your business and how we can work together? And then you follow up with them afterwards. What can you do that hasn't been done that you can make an impact and not just sit in your little cubicle and make calls? What can you do to get in front of people? How can you get in front of people? From owning a city where you're pounding the pavement and meeting people one-on-one is a great step to get out of your comfort zone. Meet with the mayor, ask him who he recommends you should meet with, and start just meeting with these people one-on-one. It's easier to say, so-and-so told me that I should meet with you and I'd like to do that, so when would be a good time? You have that comfort of going in instead of just blindly going in. You have the comfort of being recommended to go in. These are the things we have to start doing to get out of the office, to get in front of people, and to not be afraid to get in front of people.
I think these are such important points. And one thing that I want to make sure that, I say, because I'm pretty sure you agree with this too, is, listen, your management team may not be doing this for you, but that doesn't mean that you can't do these things for yourself. Like if you have a trainer in, like, you, Kathy, or if you come across me on the internet and the stuff that we're doing here, reach out to us, ask us for that conversation. You work with another trainer and you like some of the stuff they said, reach out to them. You connect with everyone you can in the industry on LinkedIn and you see some stuff that they're doing, go ask them. I think a lot of times reps in these situations can take a very woe is me if they feel like they're not getting the support that they need. But proactivity can come from the rep themselves, and rep themselves can dig themselves out of the holes even if they're not getting the support.
I get I would say at least 35 to 40 calls a week from reps, just saying this, first emailing me to ask if I would talk to them, and then just, what do you think? Am I on the right path or not? And it makes me happy that they're reaching out. It also saddens me that they can't, oftentimes they can't go to their own leadership team and ask this. My job is to help them be the best they can be. So of course I'm going to help. And I had a kid the other day who hasn't even started. He's just starting his career, and emailed me and said, do you have any tips for me as I start my career so that I can make sure that I am successful and then I go in with the right attitude? And I thought, this is really mature. This is a really good outlook. And I'm like, hey, can you get on a call? Because I'll talk to you. I have time right now. And we had a great conversation. This is a kid that's going to go in with his head screwed on straight, that really sees this as a tremendous opportunity and wants to make the most of the opportunity. So, how we go in and how we, just as you say, how we approach other people in the business, what can we do? What can we do to get better?
Yeah, there's no doubt. That's really awesome. And so, I think this one's important because, a lot of the content on my blog is focused on sales like this one is, but, I'm dedicating quite a bit of content to, making a more complete rep and finding ways to keep reps in the industry longer, especially when they're that talented. And so you hear people talk about, especially in sports with the demands on it, work-life balance all the time, but, it's really hard to actually do it in sports. So what are some of your advice or best practices for creating real, true work-life balance for reps?
I think first of all, if there's any leaders listening to this podcast, I need to have you take a step back and think. A lot of us may have had parents. Both parents worked, right? And so with both parents working, what happened as you were growing up? Did they miss some of your games? Did they miss some of your plays? Did they miss some of your band concerts? Work kind of got in the way. Maybe mom could come, dad couldn't. And you kind of grew up and you vowed, these kids today are vowing, I don't want this to happen to me. I'm not going to let this happen. And you know what? They're right. They're absolutely right. Can't blame them at all. Other industries have managed to figure out how to make work-life balance, and entertainment industry is one of the last to figure it out. So we need accountability on both sides, and I think that's huge. We need reps to give an honest 8 hours. So when you're in there, it's not just having fun because you're working in sports, but you're really there giving it your all, and you're being productive. And then on the leadership side, you need to break the mold, and you need to say, okay, I get it. I don't have to be so rigid. You don't have to come to every game. We can rotate this. What can we do to make it work? An example is in El Paso. They just had a tremendous homestand, and he gave them. They either had Friday off or Monday off. He split it up because he understands it's not easy, and that says a lot when leadership can do that. I firmly believe you should do something every day to connect to your inner self. That's huge. Yeah. Do you like to read? One night is your book night. Do you have friends? Hopefully you have friends. One night a week this is my friend night. I'm going out with them. Do you like to run? Do you like to walk? Do you like to hike? Do you have kids? How can you work around it? I had a girl that was going to work at the Cavs, and she's a stellar group seller, but she hesitated going back to sports because she's like, I have little kids and I'm just afraid I'm not going to be able to see them. And I said, before you say no, talk to them and see there's got to be other people in the same situation. And there was. And it works out very well because if her child has a little play or something, the reps among themselves say, hey, we'll take care of it. Next week our kid has this. And you work it out between you, and nobody loses. That's the way it should be. Nobody should be losing. Everyone should be able to have a quality of life. I've just seen way too many reps leave because they have no life anymore. When you're 25, you need to have some life. You can't really owe your whole existence to the organization you work for. Yeah. You need to have balance for your own sanity. So, when you do have what I call a half day, which means the day ends at 5, if you've really put in a solid 8 hours,
get out.
There's nothing wrong with leaving at 5. And you should not be judged on that. Of course, if you screwed around half the day, that's another story. But if you're really giving them a solid 8 hours and you're starting to produce, you can go, you can leave. If you can say to yourself, I've given a good 8 hours, I feel good about it. You need to go and forget about work, and you need to just go and have a quality night doing something to connect to your inner self.
Yep. And make sure that you have, because I know that, when I've, and then I've been open on this site about, my struggles with some anxiety and some depression, make sure that you create an identity outside of the office that's not related to that team. So make sure that you've got friends that aren't associated with that team, or things that you do, whether it's improv comedy or joining a softball team where you don't know anyone. Make sure that you create an identity that's separate from that team, because a lot of times what happens is, this reps will identify completely with the people that are in that office if they've moved from somewhere else. And unfortunately, right. And then that can be great a lot of times. Yes, please go out with them, hang out with them. But if you don't have an identity outside of that, and that's all it becomes wrapped up in, you feel way more like you lost than you gained anything.
Right. You're 24/7 work. And I encourage people when they go to another city, first of all, I think it's great when you move to another city. I encourage them, there's meetup groups in every city. And they're there for a purpose. They're people just like you. They're trying to meet up and have commonalities. Some are hiking groups, some are running groups, some are bicycling groups. And it's new friends that you meet along the way with a common interest.
Yep.
And that's what you need.
And you know this better than anyone. You will always be the coolest person in that group the first day because of your job.
Yep.
And so, you've had a remarkable career. There's no doubt about it. And yet you're still going, you're still helping people. It's incredible. And I'm, how big a fan I am of yours. But, in today on, May 24th, 2018, when we're recording this, what still drives you?
What drives me is working with the staff and seeing the light bulbs go off. I'm only in this for one reason, and as I tell teams, you can believe me or not believe me, it's up to you, but it's truly the only reason I'm in it is that the future of sports is sitting in front of us.
Yep.
They're in every sales room right now. And if we don't do our job and get them ready to take over, then shame on us. We can't keep doing the same things and expect different results. We have to get them to a different level so that they can take the reins and run with it. 2020 is close upon us, and it's going to be a new day and time. And what are we going to do that's different? We need to unleash that. They're the future of our sports, and we have to help them prepare for it. Working with teams, staying in touch, nothing excites me more than to have the reps call me and say, hey, I'm working on this. What do you think of this, this, and this? That really gets me excited. You know, I'm not a one and done. I want to know what's going on. Again, it goes back to it's not a win for me unless you're successful.
There's no doubt. I
haven't done my job unless you're successful. So I really take a vested interest in each rep that I work with. I really do care about them individually, and individually helping them get to where they need to be. So yes, you can do a training, but again, everybody's different. So what makes each person tick? How can I help that person tick the best? How can I help leadership see that so that they can develop that person the best too? That gets me excited.
That's awesome. And so I have one more question because I want to scratch the sports business nerd itch that I have right now. But, you know, I think, and you've had a lot of exposure to this, and now that I've been around for a while, you know, I do too. I think there was so long where the fan had it amazing in terms of ticket pricing and the stuff in the stadium and all that. And, you know, it seems like the pendulum swung way towards not just over commoditizing fans, but over commoditizing front office employees and players and athletes and all those things. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. But I really think, you know, if we're going to lose a lot of fans in sports, if we don't start swinging back, and we don't have to go all the way back to $3 tickets for professional sporting events, but, you know, I do think that there's really going to have to be a strong swing towards the customer service component and how we treat those loyal fans. Because, you know, pretty soon, like the Nippon Ham Fighters might be the most popular baseball team in the United States if we don't start making some of those changes.
Right. And I agree. What we do outside of the season is even more important than what we do in season.
Yes.
What do we do to make them feel valued? What do we do to keep them loyal with us, to keep them, to let them know that we really do care about them? And a lot of teams are starting retention teams, which is great, but they're quickly becoming, I see it way too often, they're quickly becoming fix their problems in season and give them a call or send them a card in the off season.
Not strategic.
And have a party for them. And it's so much more than that. It's so much more, and it's getting to know them more. You know, pricing. Yeah, some of our industry is pricing itself out of the market. We have to figure out who do we have as customers, who do we want as customers, and if who we want as customers is pushing them out of the market because of our pricing, then we have to sit down and figure this out. We have lots of spaces in our venues. What can we do differently? How can we readjust our spacing to accommodate that, to bring these people aboard? We have to continue, just like the pipeline in sales, we need a pipeline in our philosophy of who we're growing as our future fans.
Yeah.
And how we're growing them is going to matter as to what are we doing with pricing, what are we doing to bring them aboard, how are we bringing them aboard?
It's such an awesome point because you know, everyone, you know, I think everyone's, you know, saying, oh, just, you know, everyone's saying, wait till Atlanta gets to year 2. They're going to lose attendance on the MLS side. Wait till, you know, now they're going to be saying, wait till Atlanta gets to year 3 and they haven't won a title or blah, blah, blah. But I don't think so. I think they've cultivated a real fan base by making 50,000 fans feel like 50,000 people. And they did that through the ticket pricing. They did that through the pricing that they have inside the stadium. They've done that through the fan experience, the sense of community that they've created, the exceptional customer service that they've provided, and making sure they feel like a person and not a number. And I think every team's got to look themselves in the eye and say, are we doing this?
Right. And, you know, the expenses, sometimes, you know, you hear from teams, but our expenses are so high. We've kind of created those expenses. We need to go back and reevaluate this. And really, I've been doing a lot lately with strategic planning with teams and taking a good hard look at our business
Yep.
and what we're doing with our business and how can we get our business to grow smartly, and stop the never ending, well, we got to raise prices in order to do that. No, we don't. We don't necessarily have to. We have to just start looking at our business as a business and run it a little smarter.
Well, if your stadium's half full, you shouldn't be worried about how to get as much money as you can out of the half full stadium. It should be, how do we fill the other half of that stadium? Because all the ancillary revenue grows from there.
Yep, that's for sure.
Well, I listen, Kathy, I genuinely appreciate the time. I had a blast, and I'm excited for people to get a chance to be able to hear this.
Oh, thank you so much. I enjoyed being on it.
Awesome.